Hi, everybody. My name is Avery. I'm from Civic Tech Toronto. Civic Tech is a vibrant community organization that works to create innovative solutions to civic challenges. We meet every Tuesday night, and we're entirely volunteer run. And I encourage you to check out our website to look at some of the innovative projects we're working on and how we're connected to the global civic tech movement. The website's not listed here, but it's very easy to remember. So we work at the intersection of civic challenges and digital technologies. So we're simply civictech.ca. That's quite simple. Okay, so today I'm here to talk to you about public sector legal information, and I'm presenting on this topic because I think there's a really large potential in Canada to improve the design and access to legal information. So this is the agenda. What is public sector legal information? Why is it valuable? What's the problem with the current system? How are others meeting the challenge? And what can we do about it? Okay, let's go. So, when thinking about public sector legal information, it's helpful to think of it as along a spectrum. So on the left-hand side, we have data, and on the right-hand side, information. So essentially, a very simple way to understand this is information is more words, so word-type things, and data is more of a number-type thing. And so just to have an example, just say you have a section of legislation, say Section 2. The text of the legislation, so that's information, but the number of times that that legislation is cited by, say, a court, that's data. But we're talking about information, so we're going to focus on the right-hand side. And I'm going to define public sector legal information as any information relating to a legal topic produced by a public sector entity, including official sources of law. Okay, so we now know what we're talking about. So why is this important, right? So why have public sector legal information? So again, you can think of it as reasons falling on a spectrum. So on the top, we have better services for citizens, and on the bottom, we have holding government accountable. So I just want to unpack these ideas briefly. So to have better services, I think it's well known, we need more inclusive design. And to hold government accountable, we need more open access. So what do these terms mean? And again, very briefly, inclusive design enables and draws on the full range of human diversity. It provides ways for everyone to participate with a sense of belonging. Okay. Open access is understood by 5 criteria. So in bulk, machine readable, open licensed, free, online. So why are these criteria so essential, right? Because they enable innovative applications with that information. Okay, so let's combine the 2 axes together, and we can now throw down some common types of legal information, see where they fall. So at the top, so more related to service delivery, we have guidance documents, how-tos, forms. In the middle, we have, does a law apply to me? So that's kind of service related, or how is the law being enforced? That's accountability. At the bottom is mostly accountability. So nobody reads ministry and agency reports for fun, unless you do. And then Hansard is simply the transcripts of what our representatives say in Parliament. Okay, so we know what we're talking about. So now I'm going to illustrate the problem. I'm going to do this in 2 ways. So first, we're going to have a dramatization. And second, we're going to look at some real-life examples. Okay, so in a free and democratic society, everyone has free and equal access to law, right? Not right. No. So let's say this is the law, it's a section of legislation. So how does this person access this legislation? Well, there are some barriers, no longer happy. So things like a wall of text, difficult navigation, it's not on mobile, and a very large dearth of plain language guidance. Okay, so for the sake of argument, let's say our friend makes it to the top of the mountain. They open the box and they find only one puzzle piece. So why is this not useful, right? It's narrow scope, it's just a few words. They do relate to them, but it's not useful because it's not integrated with the other pieces of information that make that information meaningful and provide context. So what is our friend to do? So this is what they need to do. Scale multiple mountains, okay? So for example, ministry guidance about the legislation, regulations that relate to the legislation, among many others. So it's no surprise then that Our friend concludes that legal information is not designed for me and I do not belong here. That's true, they do not. Okay, so there is an alternative, luckily. That's called paid access to law. And in this situation, we have a person meeting a professional who will help complete the puzzle for them. Now, we need to note here that there is an access to justice crisis in Canada, and that means that low to middle income Canadians find it exceedingly difficult to afford or access legal services. So let's make this a bit more realistic. Ta-da! So, a high-income client with a lawyer Sherpa, which is someone who is trained to climb the mountains for them. And it's really important to note also that lawyers have access to private sector databases, which is proprietary information companies have compiled over many years, which compiles all the different information from those mountains. So those are very valuable databases and very expensive to access. So a considerable sum of money is paid, and voila, complete puzzle, no climbing necessary. Okay, so wrapping up, most Canadians are excluded from practical access to legal information. So real life examples. Okay, let's just run through these quickly. So Legislative Assembly of Ontario, let's say I want to know what my parliamentarians are talking about. So on a given day, this is the interface that you would have, right? This is the table of contents on the left, and then we have blocks and blocks of transcripts on the right, which are very difficult to navigate and understand. Just say I wanted to search topics in Hansard. I would have this interface here, and the results, I searched auto insurance, for example, and those are the dates where those words were mentioned, right? So there's no contextual amount of, it's not ranked by relevance, and I would have to click on each of these to read them. I did this for work, so. Ontario legislation, just say you wanted to browse our laws, and this is eLaws, which is a great site, but has some issues. Mainly, its layout has not changed for 100 years, right? So literally, going back hundreds of years, this is exactly how legislation is presented. Maybe something could be different. Well, we'll see. And again, I think it's worthwhile to note, it is difficult to use, even for trained professionals. It is difficult. Okay, so just say you wanted to learn about court decisions or tribunal decisions. So luckily there is a nonprofit in Canada called CanLII, and they collect all these decisions, put them on one website. So that is great. However, we have some serious problems, okay? So one being, in terms of service delivery, the case law databases are incomplete. And in terms of secondary sources, they are not integrated, right? So that means that it's very difficult to use. So you would think that, if this is the only website available to the public free of charge where you can read court and tribunal decisions, okay, is this an essential public service? No, it is not an essential public service, okay? It is funded only through a very small portion of lawyers' professional fees. It is not a public entity, it is a private entity contracted by the Federation of Law Societies. So that's service delivery. What about accountability? Okay, so the Toronto Star last year launched a legal constitutional challenge to the Ontario government seeking access to tribunal decisions. So why is this, right? So this case is about the Ontario government not having a robust open information policy. So as a result, tribunal decisions are not released in a comprehensive way, and journalists cannot adequately hold those tribunals accountable. Okay, so this is, we're gonna illustrate what other people are up to, and this is kind of a lookbook, so I'm gonna just zoom through these. OpenParliament.ca is a citizen-led project. There's absolutely no government involvement. It is a portal into Parliament. So just say I wanted to search a topic such as truth and reconciliation, right? I have relevant information on the sidebar there, such as by party, jurisdiction, representative. In the middle, I have this graph of the prevalence of the topic over time, and I have contextual search results, which are great. If I want to look up a representative, I have a word cloud of the most frequently used words. I have all their social media feeds. And on the right, I have transcripts that are easy to understand, or easy to navigate at least. Okay, Fiscal Note is a platform for lobbyists to the US government. So I'm not suggesting that citizens should be lobbyists. I'm just saying this illustrates the potential when you have machine-readable information. Like, what are innovative applications? What can be done? So when you log on to Parliament, you have a personalized greeting page, which shows the topics that you're interested in and your agenda. If you search for policy issues, you will find policies in every jurisdiction that are related to your interests. If you want to search for representatives, you'll have an analytics effectiveness score on how effectively they advance your interests in a particular area. And then if you want to drill down, you have the entire history of your parliamentarian. And finally, why isn't Parliament coming to you? So these are notifications and alerts of things that might be said that are of interest to you. Okay, finally, e-regulations. This is an open source platform for browsing legislation. It was created by 18F, which is the agency that Hillary Hartley led before coming to Ontario. So comparison to e-laws, we have a persistent table of contents, which is a great innovation. We have integrated secondary information, such as important topics. You can ask questions of the regulator. You have additional resources, services, and tools, all integrated within the law itself. Just a bit more of browsing. You have integrated decisions here, and you have a dynamic interface where users can learn how to use the system. Okay, so let's do some takeaways here. And I want to return to the key themes of this presentation, which are accountability and service delivery, sorry. So what should we be doing here? In my opinion, we need to advocate for open access to information. So Ontario does not have a robust open information policy. I think they're working on it. But these jurisdictions do, and we could follow in their footsteps. And also we need to advocate with some sense of urgency. This is what I feel the pace is. You know, we'll get there in 20 years, but really I think we can get there in like 2 or 3 years. So finally, service delivery. So I think we need to ask hard questions. I think that was said earlier. So in this particular case, I think the hard questions are, what does government owe its citizens with regards to access to legal information? So if laws do belong to citizens, why isn't plain language guidance integral to the presentation of laws? And finally, what's the service standard? Right? How long should it take? How much time and effort should it take a citizen to develop a basic understanding of laws that are important to them? So this service design approach, there are lots of people working in this space in Ontario and abroad. You know, they ask key questions like, for the information that I have, and I think this applies to all different sectors, for the information that you have, who are the target users? What are the use cases? Can you define a service standard for your information? So here are some further resources I'd encourage you to check out. And that's the end. So thank you.
Fascinating, Avery. Thank you for that. Lots of questions for you. How can orgs like Civic Tech Toronto help people with poor access navigate? And what topics do you see the most need for?
Poor access. Poor access in what sense?
I would say poor access in terms of lack of availability.
Okay, I mean, I think, like, so for example, Civic Tech is kind of a, what do you call it? We call it also like water between the cracks kind of thing. So people from all different professional backgrounds kind of mix and mingle in this space. The way that we work on projects is really focused on user-centered design. So I think that's kind of inherent into the idea of Civic Tech. So there are a variety of projects that are there. People with very poor access, I think that Civic Tech as an organization would have to innovate to do outreach more than it is currently. But there's a lot of precedent in other countries for that, specifically in the US. They have a really vibrant Civic Tech community.
Excellent. Are there ethical issues to this information being made open without providing the education to go along?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the other question to ask, which is a counter question to this, is like, well, what are the ethical issues when the information is not made available, right? So yes, I think the main ones is privacy. So there are good reasons why courts may not want to release tribunal decisions, because there might be private information. So tenants, for example, could be blacklisted based on the fact that they just had an application. They didn't even do anything. Their name is just on the list. So there is a need to have policies to deal with that. I just don't think that we're investing enough in actually getting it done. So we're just kind of, oh yeah, it's true, it exists, but we're not actually investing to actually get it done. Yeah, I think that's...
And is it primarily the US that's leading on this, or are there other jurisdictions that...
In terms of open access to information, I think policy-wise, US and EU. EU has had a directive since 2003, and they're renewing it now in 2017, yeah.
Excellent. We'll go to the room for a question, if there's some questions from the room. Denise has a microphone. Are there any questions? No? Everyone's getting tired. Maybe we'll just ask one more question. The risks when government tips more towards data and away from information. Oh yeah, so that's similar to the previous question in terms of kind of the ethical.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now the policies are already tipped towards data. Like you mostly hear about our open data directive or open data policies. Officially speaking, I think open government, they say there are 3 pillars to open government: open data, open information, and open dialogue. But I think in terms of the work that's been done to date, it's been mostly on open data. So I think we actually need to push the other way and get some open access to information.
Okay, and then we'll take one question from the audience.
So I have an ill-formed question. So I work for an organization, and civic tech does work that sometimes fills the gaps that exist when government isn't providing those services. But you also raise the question that, you know, how much should we expect from governments? And so what's the, I don't know, can you speak about the tension between doing some of the work that you are hoping that government should be doing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think it's kind of the future of government, having these kind of hybrid organizations. I think I would encourage you to look up Civic Hall in New York City. They have a ridiculous amount of funding. They have millions of dollars of funding to create a community-based hub where you're having education institutions, government institutions. Yeah, I think this is like just new ways to think about it. It's quite exciting time. So yeah, I don't have like a clear answer. I think it's like it's being formulated as we go. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Avery.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Dayana Cadet. I'm a content specialist at Hubba.
And my name is Jessica Yamoah, and I am the Executive Director of Innovate Inclusion.
Perfect. And we are here on behalf of Move the Dial. So, as I'm sure we can all agree, Canada is poised to become one of the leading tech hubs in the world. Unfortunately, we're suffering from a lack of talent that is limiting our growth potential. Move the Dial seeks to address this issue in part by increasing female participation and leadership in tech. So our values have been a really huge key to our success. Through high-impact programs, Move the Dial supports women at all stages of their career. We're really focused on driving awareness, inspiring action, and creating a community of peers and mentors that are committed to supporting change. We believe that partnerships and collaboration are the key to making a bigger impact, and we're really focused on driving progress when it comes to the core issues that are impacting the advancement of technology. Since being founded last year, Move the Dial has made tremendous progress. We've rolled out pilot programs that have helped us connect with female founders and leaders within the tech space, and we do a lot of listening and information gathering about the gaps within the tech space so that we can work towards filling those gaps. Just to give you a couple of examples of some of our initiatives, a really big one we're working on right now is Move the Dial Stories, which is a digital media content hub. Basically, we're sharing the authentic stories and challenges and triumphs of a variety of women within tech. And right now, we're looking forward to the Move the Dial Global Summit of 2018, which will showcase world-changing leaders and accomplishments that are shaping the equality and diversity landscape within business and society. That being said, Jessica and I are here from Move the Dial for Everyone, which is a volunteer-based advisory committee for Move the Dial, whose mission is to amplify the voices of underrepresented groups within the tech community. So Move the Dial for Everyone was born out of a need and a desire to move the conversation one step further. That means not just moving the dial for women, but moving the dial for women of color. So really how we started is we were thinking, you know, so many women of color walk into a room and think, I'm the only woman here that looks like me. Or they're sitting at a conference and they think, I can't relate to anyone on this panel. Or they even look at a job posting and they think, what's the point? They'll never hire someone like me. We believe so strongly in the values of Move the Dial, but we really felt it was missing that key piece. So we put together this committee to ensure that a variety of perspectives were both valued and heard. It's called Move the Dial for Everyone because we believe that ultimately moving the dial in this way benefits everyone. So that being said, Jess can tell us a bit more about the statistics around the underrepresentation of women of color within the tech space.
Thank you. So when we start building the business case for diversity and inclusion within the innovation and tech space, oftentimes people refer to the diversity report that was put out or released by Google in 2014. I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2014, the numbers reflected that Google's diversity was something in the space of approximately 60% Caucasian, 31% Asian, and then the remaining 9% was African American, Latin, Hispanic, and other minority groups. So that was 2014. Fast forward to 2017, and not much has changed. The only difference is how they reflected their numbers, where they combined Caucasian and their Asian employee group, reporting it or reflecting it as 91% again, fast forward to 2017, with the same groups, African American, Latin, Hispanic, and other minority groups comprising the other 9%. An interesting call out that Google made, though, was that despite Asian or their Asian community being overrepresented in the Google space or in technology and innovation, that Asians within North America or the US specifically are an underrepresented minority group. So if we start taking a look at the intersection between gender and race, the National Science Federation, or NSF, did a study where they looked at the different biases that are experienced by women and then broke it out by women of color versus Caucasian women, and found that of the biggest, experiences of women versus women of color, there's a notion or a concept of tug of war, where oftentimes women experience bias in the workplace that forces that, or that causes women to be singled out because of their gender. And then it goes one step further, where women amongst ourselves have a tug of war where we undercut each other, or there's a competition where there's a feeling there's only space for one woman at the top. So 50% of Caucasian women felt this way, 59% of women of color felt this way, and it started to reflect and show itself through office politics. So in doing so, it's detrimental to women's careers that earlier on they faced this tug of war. So the question is, where do we go from here? How do we find solutions? And Dayana's going to speak to some of the solutions.
Thank you, Jessica. So yeah, at Move the Dial, we really believe in taking a solutions-based approach. So we don't want to be all talk. We want to be about action as well. So we're really here, and why it was important for us to be here is really to ask you, the audience, and our community at large, to move the dial for the women of color within your networks. So you can do that in a multitude of ways. I'm going to try to use this cool laser here. So you can do that by driving awareness within your team. Think about how you make someone feel like they belong. Create goals and policies that promote diversity and inclusion, whether that's in hiring, retention, promotion, or even within your external partnerships. You can inspire action amongst your peers. Take the time to identify key women of color within your industry. I hear so many employers saying, you know, we're all about diversity, we totally care, but underrepresented groups just aren't applying. You can take the next step, you can take that action to find them and invite them to apply. Create a community of inclusion. Speak up the next time you see exclusion, whether that be in meetings, panels, recruitment, even marketing materials. As Jess is so fond of saying, a bag of red M&Ms is still just a bag of red M&Ms. So this isn't about us targeting one specific group and saying you're doing it wrong, but it's really about making sure that you're hearing diverse perspectives no matter what you're doing. You can forge partnerships with other initiatives and nonprofits within the community. More than just thinking about how your work culture is inclusive, think outside of the box. How are you sourcing and developing new talent and leaders? And finally, promote programs that help move the dial. Whether that's co-op programs, paid internships, or other initiatives, help build up these communities of underrepresented groups that have historically always felt excluded and unheard. So this is the Move the Dial for Everyone Advisory Committee. And as you can see, we represent women from all sorts of backgrounds, orientations, and paths in lives. And we really came together hoping that our diverse perspectives and experiences would do something to change the status quo. And we really want to leave you with the message that we are here. And we're really hoping to inspire action and for you to help us move the dial for everyone. Thank you.
Do some questions. Excellent. We've got some time for questions, and I know people are getting weary at the end of a long day, but Slido is full of questions. I like this one. Being in tech, I don't like being referred to as a woman in tech. I want to be considered a tech professional, like any male in this space. How do you feel about this?
I think that's fair. I think right now when we say women in tech, we're talking about the work we're doing to kind of move the dial or change the conversation. But of course, on a day-to-day, just like I don't want to be referred to as that black girl, I want to be referred to as a person. I think that's something definitely that as a person who deserves respect, that's not your entire identity, and it shouldn't be such.
And to add to that, specifically speaking in terms of data and collection, we are leveraging the information from the states, but we need to benchmark certain elements or benchmark certain things, and we have to start with some type of classification. So that's the context that's being used in. To everyone's point, we want to be seen as people, and Dayana and Jessica, not as that girl or that woman or that person. So,
great. How do you feel about quotas? Whether it's on boards or...
I think, so for me, I feel like it's definitely not good to, as a company or as a leader in the space, to think of it as just ticking off boxes. But I think you really need to look at the gaps and how you can fill them. So, for example, where I work, we knew we weren't about quotas. We didn't want to hire people of color or underrepresented groups just for the sake of saying that we're doing it. But we put out a survey and we saw, okay, why is there only this much percentage of women in leadership? Why are there only this much percentage of minorities? And now what can we do now that we know this information to really build on that? So I think it depends on how you're looking at quotas. It doesn't necessarily have to be an evil thing. It's just your intentions definitely have to be in the right place.
and personally, I don't believe in quotas. I believe in accountability. And if there's an accountability, then there wouldn't be a need for quotas. As well, I believe in targeting versus tokenism. So when those things are applied, and it's just the leverage and the context, again, that puts everything in perspective.
So can you talk a bit more about what you mean by accountability in a practical sense?
So accountability being within an organization. So for example, Innovate Inclusion released an incubator diversity report, and working with some of the incubators across Ontario, there were incubators that stepped up and they were accountable and right off the bat spoke to the fact that they are not diverse in terms of their boards and their senior management or their stakeholders or decision-making teams or employees. So them taking the accountability to not wait for it to come out in a report, but to say, okay, we acknowledge this, how do we move the dial, how do we step forward to be accountable for our actions and actions moving forward? So that's a practical example.
Excellent. Questions from the audience? Yes.
Hi, so I recently did recruitment, and I work with the recruitment consultant. We spent about 3 weeks researching different employee networks of diverse groups to see if we can advertise the posting there, right, to attract a more diverse candidate. And what we found was that they were all charging a fee, like a $500 fee for us to advertise on, to their membership here, to another membership there. So I just felt like that was like a disconnect between the grassroots policy and the bigger intent. So how do you get around that?
I'll answer that really quickly. Working in the space and coming from the corporate world, I think there's a disconnect around community work and the fact that when something's a community-based organization, it should be for free. I come from a corporate world where every single dollar, every single minute is quantified. So to go and say now that because it has an attachment to community work, it has less value when they are giving 10 times more than any lawyer who bills by the minute or anyone else is a disrespect and a disservice to our communities. And the other challenge being, if we were wholeheartedly invested in these communities that we're trying to recruit from, you wouldn't have to because you'd have those networks already pre-built and already at your disposal. So you wouldn't have to go above and beyond. And when you pay to advertise on LinkedIn, you pay to advertise on LinkedIn. When you pay to do an out-of-home billboard, you pay to do an out-of-home billboard. So why there shouldn't be a fee associated with the time and the value that these organizations bring to the table, especially when it's niche and it's something you definitely need because you don't have that at your disposal, I think there's a disconnect there, and that we should start to look at things differently from a different perspective, as again, building a business case where there's a value versus seeing it as a deficit.
Yeah, please applaud. The final question can't be asked on Slido because it's too good. It's Ekem's question about who's the parent of 2 one-year-old daughters. We have to hear the question live. We have to see this person. Privacy. Yay. Okay, ask your question.
My question is, what conversation do you, first of all, think, and second of all, hope that my 2 one-year-old daughters are having about this topic in 20 years?
Okay, I'll take the lead on this one. In 20 years, I'm hoping that the conversation is, wow, like my parents and the people that came before me put in the groundwork, and that this isn't much of a conversation. They're thinking about, what fabulous places they'll be traveling to around the world to get real firsthand experience. And just the fact that, again, in terms of accountability, we will hold ourselves accountable. Looking at Google, the fact that we can look 3-4 years later and there's been no change, that says a lot. So an accountability in a 360-degree approach where there's an accountability from a government perspective because government creates the laws. There's an accountability from a private sector perspective because they infuse the economy. There's an accountability from the communities themselves. It's like educate yourselves, become immersed, prepare yourselves so you're in a position to be qualified to be in these positions and have these jobs. And then even just from the ecosystem in terms of supporting the culture, the incubators, the accelerators, all of the programming, making sure that they are inclusive and that they reflect the communities and have people that are qualified to understand and appreciate the cultural nuances that are coming with technology, that are coming with women that are bringing different types of businesses to the table, that are coming with people from different orientations and ethnic backgrounds, and our strong immigrant community. Being Canadian, a lot of us are first and second generation, so even bringing some of those cultural nuances that come from our family, our homelands or our family homelands, and appreciating those, and hopefully that your daughters will be able to say, okay, my parents or grandparents or whoever it is came from here and able to meld their Canadian experience with those experiences in 20 years.
Thank you so much to both of you. That was a fascinating discussion.